burn! You did this to us!
How could you?
You psychotic monster!
What would you do if your husband poured gasoline on your brand new car and set it ablaze right in your driveway? Can you imagine that level of betrayal? Simply because you refused to stay the person he tried to break you into being. And what happened next proves that sometimes, when you push a woman to her absolute limit, she doesn't shatter. She becomes unbreakable. This is the story of what happens when a man mistakes his wife's transformation for betrayal and realizes far too late that he just destroyed his own future with his bare hands. Stay tuned, because this story will leave you speechless. To understand the story, watch it full video. Don't forget to share it and tell me, what did you learn? Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Real Incredible Stories. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Your support means everything to us. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story. Another chapter is coming up next. Her name was Nina Cole. At 27 years old, she was married to Daniel Cole, a sales manager at a major tech company in Atlanta. When they married 3 years earlier, Nina was petite, soft-spoken, always wearing a warm smile. Daniel was proud to have her on his arm at company events, showing her off like a trophy he'd won. But after she gave birth to their son, Marcus, everything shifted like tectonic plates beneath their marriage. Her body changed in the way bodies do after creating and sustaining life. She gained weight. Her stomach bore the silver roadmap of stretch marks. Her breasts, which had nourished their child, no longer sat high and perky. Her hips had widened to accommodate the miracle of birth. And Daniel made absolutely certain she knew he noticed every single change. "Nina, you're eating again? Look at yourself. You look like a stuffed sack," he'd say, his voice dripping with contempt. She'd be standing at the stove, preparing his dinner after a long day with their infant son, and he'd walk past, shaking his head slowly, deliberately. "The woman I married had a figure. Now you look like somebody's aunt. Can't you do something about yourself?" Can you imagine hearing those words from your husband? The man who stood before God and witnesses and promised to love you through sickness and health, for better or worse, now calling you a stuffed sack. Reducing you to an insult he wouldn't dare say to a stranger. Nina would lock herself in the bathroom and cry silently, her hand pressed against her mouth to muffle the sobs so Daniel wouldn't hear and mock her for being emotional again. She'd splash cold water on her face, wipe away the evidence of her pain, and walk back out to serve his dinner with that same quiet smile, because that's what she'd been taught growing up. A good wife endures. A good wife doesn't complain. A good wife makes it work. But Daniel didn't stop there. His cruelty evolved, becoming sharper, more calculated. He started comparing her to other women as if she were a product that had failed quality inspection. "You see that woman from my office? Jessica. She just had twins, but her body still looks like she's in her 20s. Why can't you take care of yourself like that?" Or he'd be scrolling through social media and deliberately turn his phone toward her. "Look at this woman. This is what a wife should look like, not like this." He'd gesture at Nina's body with undisguised disgust, his face twisted as if she repulsed him. Each comment landed like a punch. Each comparison carved away another piece of her self-worth. Nina began avoiding mirrors. She wore loose, shapeless clothes that hid her body. She stopped taking photos. She became a ghost in her own life, invisible even to herself. One evening, after putting Marcus to bed, Nina gathered every ounce of courage she had left. Her hands trembled as she approached Daniel, who was sprawled on the couch, phone in hand. "Daniel, I've been thinking. I want to go back to work." He looked up, eyebrows raised in genuine surprise. "Work? For what? I'm providing everything you need." "I know," Nina said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I need to do something for myself. I need to feel valuable again." Daniel threw his head back and laughed, a loud mocking sound that filled their living room and made Nina's cheeks burn with humiliation. "Valuable? Nina, look at yourself. Who's going to hire you? You look like someone's grandmother. You think any company wants someone who looks like that representing them?" Nina's eyes filled with tears, but something inside her, something that had been dormant, buried under layers of shame and submission, suddenly hardened into steel. Her jaw tightened. "I'll find out," she said firmly. And that was the moment everything began to change. 2 weeks later, Nina received a call that would alter the trajectory of her entire life. She'd applied to 15 different companies, faced 7 rejections, and endured 3 interviews where she felt the interviewer's eyes judging her appearance before her qualifications. But then came the call from Richardson Analytics, a mid-sized consulting firm in downtown Atlanta. "Ms. Cole, this is Patricia Chen from Richardson Analytics. We'd like to offer you the position of junior data analyst." Nina's hand flew to her mouth. "Really? Thank you. Thank you so much." The salary wasn't impressive, but it was hers. Her own money. Her own accomplishment. For the first time in 3 years, Nina felt like she was someone beyond Daniel's wife, or Marcus's mother. When she told Daniel that evening, his reaction was predictably dismissive. "A junior data analyst?" He snorted, not even looking up from his dinner. "What's that? Some entry-level position? What are they paying you, minimum wage?" "It's a start," Nina replied, keeping her voice steady. "A start," he repeated mockingly. "Well, don't let it interfere with taking care of the house and Marcus. Your real job is here." Nina said nothing. She'd learned that silence was sometimes the strongest response. On her first day at Richardson Analytics, Nina wore one of her old pre-pregnancy dresses. It was too tight, the buttons straining, but it was the most professional thing she owned. She walked into that office building with her head held high, despite the voice in her head that sounded suspiciously like Daniel, telling her she didn't belong there. Her cubicle was small, tucked in a corner near the break room. Her computer was slightly outdated. But to Nina, it felt like a throne room. This was hers. Her supervisor, a kind woman named Patricia, showed her the basics. "Don't worry about being perfect right away. Just learn and ask questions." Nina threw herself into the work with an intensity that surprised even herself. She stayed late studying reports, watched tutorial videos during lunch, and asked colleagues for advice. Every small success, every spreadsheet mastered, every dataset analyzed, felt like reclaiming a piece of herself. But with her first paycheck came a decision that would change everything. Nina didn't spend it on new clothes or makeup or any of the things Daniel might have expected. Instead, she spent 2 hours researching gyms near her office, comparing prices and reviews. Finally, she settled on FitZone, a no-frills gym 3 blocks from Richardson Analytics. The membership cost $150 a month, a significant chunk of her modest salary. But Nina knew this wasn't about vanity. This was about survival. This was about proving to herself that she could transform, that she wasn't trapped in the body Daniel despised, trapped in the life that had become a prison. She also found a nutritionist online, a recent graduate who offered affordable meal plans for new mothers trying to lose weight healthily. They video called twice a week. The nutritionist, a cheerful young woman named Amy, taught Nina about portion control, meal prep, and listening to her body's signals instead of eating emotionally. The routine Nina established was brutal. She woke every morning at 4:30, before the sun rose, before Marcus stirred, before Daniel's alarm went off. She'd slip into workout clothes in the dark, careful not to wake anyone, and drive to FitZone. The first few weeks were agony. Her body, unused to exercise after years of neglect, screamed in protest. She could barely complete a 15-minute session on the elliptical without gasping for air. Other gym members, with their toned bodies and effortless movements, made her feel like an imposter. But Nina kept showing up. Every single morning. No matter how sore she was, no matter how much easier it would be to hit the snooze button and stay in bed. Daniel, predictably, mocked her efforts every step of the way. "Going to your little gym again," he'd call out as she left at 5 in the morning. "All that sweating and you still look the same." You're wasting your time and my money. It's my money, Nina would reply quietly, not turning around. Whatever, Daniel would mutter, rolling over in bed. But Nina kept going. She kept working. She kept pushing. Because somewhere deep inside, she remembered the woman she used to be before Daniel's words had whittled her down to nothing. And she was determined to find that woman again. 3 months into her new routine, something remarkable began to happen. The changes were subtle at first: a pair of pants that fit a little looser, a face that looked slightly less puffy in the bathroom mirror, energy levels that didn't crash by mid-afternoon. But Nina noticed. And she held on to those small victories like lifelines. At work, her performance was exceeding expectations. Patricia called her into her office one afternoon, a rare smile on her usually serious face. "Nina, I have to say, I'm impressed. Your analysis on the Bennett Industries account was exceptional. You caught discrepancies that our senior analysts missed." Nina felt warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you. I just wanted to be thorough." "Well, your thoroughness saved the client over $100,000. That's not nothing." Patricia leaned back in her chair. "Keep this up, and you'll be moving up faster than you think." As the months progressed, Nina's transformation became impossible to ignore. The weight came off steadily, not through crash diets or dangerous pills, but through consistent effort, proper nutrition, and Amy's guidance. 5 pounds became 10. 10 became 20. 20 became 35. But more than the physical changes, something else was shifting. Nina started making eye contact with people again. She laughed more easily at work. She offered ideas in meetings instead of staying silent. Her colleagues began seeking her out for advice, respecting her opinion. She bought new clothes, not the shapeless, oversized pieces she'd been hiding in, but fitted dresses and tailored pants that showed she had a figure, that she was a woman who took pride in her appearance. Nothing flashy or inappropriate, just professional attire that made her feel confident. Her colleague Marcus, not her son, but a friendly analyst who sat 2 cubicles over, commented one day, "Nina, I don't know what you're doing, but you're glowing lately. Keep it up." Nina smiled genuinely. "Just taking care of myself." Well, it shows. At home, however, the atmosphere grew increasingly toxic. Daniel noticed the changes, but instead of feeling proud or supportive, he felt something darker, threatened. "Why are you wearing that dress?" he demanded one morning as Nina prepared for work. "It's too tight. Who are you trying to impress at that office?" "No one, Daniel. It's just a work dress. Yourself." He laughed bitterly. "You didn't lose weight for me. You're doing this for someone else. I know it. There's someone at your office, isn't there?" "Daniel, that's ridiculous. I'm doing this for myself because you made me feel worthless." "Oh, so now I'm the bad guy?" "I'm just being honest. If you can't handle honesty, that's your problem." Let that sink in for a moment. The man who had systematically destroyed his wife's self-esteem, who had compared her to other women daily, who had called her a stuffed sack, he was now angry that she'd found the strength to rebuild herself. He couldn't handle that the broken woman he'd created refused to stay broken. Nina's job performance continued to soar. 6 months in, she was assigned to a major project, analyzing operational efficiency for a potential international client. The project was worth millions to Richardson Analytics, and Patricia trusted Nina to be part of the core team. The team leader was Patricia's boss, Richard Chen, the senior vice president. He was a serious, no-nonsense man in his 50s who had built his career on results, not charm. During their first team meeting, he asked each member to present their initial findings. When Nina's turn came, she stood, clicked through her presentation, and laid out a comprehensive analysis that included not just the current inefficiencies but projected solutions with cost-benefit breakdowns. Richard listened in silence, his expression unreadable. When she finished, the room was quiet for a long moment. Then Richard nodded slowly. "That's the most thorough preliminary analysis I've seen in 5 years. Well done, Nina." The other team members looked at her with new respect. Nina felt 10 feet tall walking back to her cubicle that day. But at home, when she tried to share her success with Daniel, he was scrolling through his phone, barely listening. "That's nice," he muttered dismissively. "Don't let it go to your head. You're still just an analyst." Nina looked at her husband, this man she'd once loved, once believed in, and felt nothing but pity. He was so consumed by his own insecurity that he couldn't see what was right in front of him. A wife who was becoming extraordinary, despite his best efforts to keep her small. "You're right," Nina said quietly. "I'm just an analyst. For now." And she walked away, leaving Daniel alone with his phone and his bitterness. 8 months into working at Richardson Analytics, Nina received an email that made her heart race. The subject line read, "Meeting request, Richard Chen, urgent." Nina's mind immediately went to worst-case scenarios. Had she made a mistake on the international project? Was she being let go? Her hands trembled slightly as she clicked to accept the meeting scheduled for that afternoon. When 3 o'clock arrived, Nina walked to Richard's corner office, her professional heels clicking against the marble floor. She knocked twice. "Come in," Richard's voice called from inside. Nina entered to find not just Richard, but also Patricia and Jennifer Moore, the company's CFO. Her stomach dropped. "Nina, please sit," Richard said, gesturing to the chair across from his massive desk. She sat, folding her hands in her lap to keep them from shaking. Richard leaned forward, his expression serious but not unkind. "Nina, we've been watching your performance very carefully over these past months. The international client you helped us with, do you know what happened?" Nina's mouth went dry. "No, sir. I submitted all my reports on time, but I haven't heard the final outcome." Richard's stern face suddenly broke into a rare smile. "They signed a 3-year contract worth $12 million. And do you know what they specifically mentioned in their decision-making process?" Nina shook her head, not trusting her voice. "Your efficiency analysis," Patricia interjected, smiling warmly. "They said it was the most comprehensive and actionable report they'd received from any consulting firm. You essentially won us that contract." Nina's eyes widened. I just did my job." "You did exceptional work," Jennifer added. "Which is why we called you here. Nina, we'd like to promote you to Senior Data Analyst. It comes with a significant salary increase, a performance bonus, and your own office." The room seemed to tilt slightly. Nina blinked, wondering if she'd heard correctly. "A promotion? Already?" "You've earned it," Richard said firmly. "Your starting bonus alone will be $200,000. The raise brings your annual salary to $120,000. $200,000. Nina had never seen that kind of money in her entire life. She'd grown up in a modest household, married Daniel when she was barely making $30,000 a year as a receptionist, and had spent the last 3 years financially dependent on a man who made her feel worthless. "I don't know what to say," Nina whispered, tears pricking her eyes. "Say yes," Patricia said with a grin. "Yes. Absolutely, yes. Thank you so much." After the meeting, Nina practically floated back to her cubicle. She sat down, staring at her computer screen without really seeing it, her mind racing. $200,000. She could save. She could invest. She could secure a future for Marcus that didn't depend on Daniel's approval or charity. And then an idea formed, one that surprised her even as it crystallized in her mind. Daniel's birthday was coming up in 3 weeks. Despite everything, despite the cruel words, the constant criticism, the emotional abuse that had become their normal, Nina still remembered the man she'd married. Or maybe she remembered who she'd hoped he could be. She wanted to do something meaningful, something that would show him she still cared, that she wasn't the bitter, resentful person he seemed determined to make her into. She'd buy him something he'd always wanted but could never justify, a new car. Specifically, a black Toyota 4Runner, the SUV he'd admired for years but dismissed as too expensive for our budget. Over the next 2 weeks, Nina worked with a dealership in Buckhead. She test-drove vehicles, negotiated prices, and finally settled on a gorgeous black 4Runner with leather interior and all the features Daniel had dreamed about. The price was $185,000. She paid in full, in cash, from her bonus. The salesman looked at her with newfound respect as she signed the papers. "This is one lucky guy," he commented. Nina smiled sadly. "I hope he thinks so." She arranged for the car to be delivered to their home on Daniel's birthday. She'd take the day off work, prepare his favorite meal, and surprise him. Maybe, just maybe, this gesture would remind him of who they used to be. Maybe it would heal something between them. But Daniel's paranoia had been growing like a cancer, fed by his own insecurity. Every time Nina came home with a smile, every time she mentioned a colleague's name, every time she looked at her phone, he was convinced she was having an affair. And his suspicion was about to destroy everything. Daniel Cole had become a man possessed. For weeks now, his mind had been consumed by a single poisonous thought: Nina was cheating on him. It was the only explanation that made sense to his fractured logic. How else could she have transformed so completely? How else could she afford that gym membership, those new clothes, that confidence that radiated from her like light? She'd been broken, and he'd made sure of it. Broken things didn't fix themselves. Someone else had to be helping her. "It's that boss of hers," Daniel muttered to himself one evening, sitting alone in their living room after Nina had gone to bed. "That Richard guy she keeps mentioning. He's giving her money. That's why she's so happy all the time now." The thought gnawed at him day and night, during meetings at work, while driving, while lying next to Nina in bed. He started watching her more closely, looking for evidence to confirm what he already believed to be true. One Wednesday evening, while Nina was giving Marcus a bath, Daniel picked up her phone from the kitchen counter. His hands shook slightly as he typed in her passcode. Marcus's birthday, predictable as always. He scrolled through her messages, his eyes scanning frantically. Most were mundane: conversations with her mother, texts about project deadlines with colleagues, reminders about Marcus's pediatrician appointment. Then he found the message thread with Richard Chen. His heart rate spiked as he opened it. "Richard, Nina, great work on the preliminary numbers. Let's discuss the surprise project tomorrow after the team meeting." "Nina, sounds good. I'm really excited about how this is coming together." "Richard, your dedication is impressive. This project wouldn't be possible without you." "Nina, thank you. I can't wait to see the final result." Daniel's vision blurred with rage. Surprise project. Dedication. Can't wait. These weren't professional messages. These were the words of people who were involved, who shared secrets, who were planning something together. "I knew it," he whispered venomously, his grip tightening on the phone. Over the next several days, Daniel called in sick to work, something he'd never done before. Instead of going to his office, he followed Nina. He parked down the street from their house each morning and tailed her car at a distance, watching as she went to her gym, then to Richardson Analytics, then back home. Nothing suspicious. But Daniel was convinced he just needed to watch longer, dig deeper. His own job performance began to suffer. His boss, Martin Foster, called him into his office one afternoon during one of the rare days Daniel actually showed up to work. "Daniel, is everything okay? You've missed 3 client calls this month. You called in sick 4 times. The Springfield account is furious because you haven't returned their emails." Daniel barely registered the words. "I'm sorry, Martin. Family issues. It won't happen again." "It better not," Martin said, his tone harder than usual. "You're one of our top performers, but you're on thin ice right now. Get it together." Daniel nodded absently, his mind already back on Nina. That night, he went through her email. She'd left her laptop open after checking something for work. He found correspondence with a car dealership in Buckhead. His breath caught. She'd been emailing back and forth with a salesman named Trevor about a Toyota 4Runner. Black. Fully loaded. $185,000. $185,000. Where would Nina get that kind of money? Her salary wasn't that high. Unless he's buying her a car, Daniel concluded, his hands trembling with rage. Richard Chan is buying my wife a car. She's sleeping with him, and he's buying her a goddamn car. The fact that it never occurred to Daniel that Nina might have earned this money herself, through her own talent and hard work, speaks volumes about how little he thought of her, how completely he'd underestimated the woman he'd married. Daniel's birthday arrived on a Saturday. Nina had texted him earlier in the week, asking him to make sure he was home by 2 in the afternoon. "I have a surprise for you," she'd written, adding a heart emoji. A surprise. The word made his blood boil. She was probably going to rub it in his face, show off what her lover had bought her. That morning, Daniel told Nina he had to run errands. Instead, he followed her. She drove to the Buckhead dealership, and Daniel parked across the street, watching through binoculars he'd bought specifically for this purpose. He watched as Nina walked around the lot. Then Richard Chan arrived, and the two of them stood together, looking at a black 4Runner, laughing, pointing at features, looking for all the world like a couple choosing a car together. Daniel's chest tightened until he couldn't breathe. His hands shook so violently he could barely hold the binoculars. His mind screamed with rage and humiliation. He didn't wait to see more. He couldn't. He drove to a gas station, his vision tunneled with fury, and bought a 5-gallon red jerry can. He filled it with gasoline, the sharp smell making his eyes water. Then he drove home and waited in the darkness of their garage, drinking whiskey straight from the bottle, the jerry can sitting next to him like a weapon waiting to be deployed. Daniel sat in the dim garage, the jerry can of gasoline beside him, the smell of whiskey on his breath, and rage burning hotter than any flame ever could. Hours crawled by. The afternoon sun shifted across the garage floor. He heard Marcus playing inside the house, heard Nina moving around, humming softly. The sound of her happiness made him sick. Around 5 in the evening, he heard the distinct sound of an engine approaching. Not Nina's regular car. Something bigger, deeper. An SUV engine. Daniel stood up, swaying slightly from the alcohol, and peered through the garage door window. A brand new black Toyota 4Runner was pulling into their driveway. Nina was behind the wheel, a huge smile on her face. She had balloons tied to the steering wheel, and through the passenger window, he could see a birthday cake sitting on the seat. She was bringing the car here. To their home. Parading her affair right in front of him. Nina stepped out of the 4Runner, still beaming, wearing a nice dress she'd bought with her own money, carrying the cake carefully with one hand and holding the balloons with the other. "Daniel," she called out, looking around. "Daniel, where are you? Come see your birthday surprise." Daniel emerged from the garage, carrying the jerry can. His eyes were bloodshot, his jaw clenched, his entire body radiating fury. Nina's smile faltered when she saw him. "Daniel. What's wrong? What is that? What's wrong?" Daniel's voice was a low growl. "You brought home a car that your lover bought you, and you're asking what's wrong?" Nina's face went pale. "What? Daniel, this is..." "Don't lie to me," he screamed, cutting her off. I saw you with him at the dealership. Richard Chen. You think I'm stupid. Daniel, please listen." But Daniel wasn't listening. Years of insecurity, months of watching his wife transform into someone he couldn't control, weeks of paranoid surveillance, it all erupted at once. He unscrewed the cap of the jerry can and began pouring gasoline over the 4Runner. The clear liquid splashed across the hood, ran down the sides, pooled on the ground beneath it. The sharp, nauseating smell filled the air, overwhelming everything. "Daniel, stop. Please." Nina dropped the cake and balloons, reaching out toward him. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," Daniel snarled, pulling a lighter from his pocket. "I'd rather burn it than be disrespected in my own home." "Daniel, no." He flicked the lighter. The small flame danced in the evening air for just a moment. Then he dropped it. The gasoline ignited with a whoosh that sent Nina stumbling backward. Flames exploded across the Forerunner, engulfing it in seconds. Orange and yellow fire climbed up the sides, licked at the windows, consumed the balloons in an instant. The heat was immediate and intense, pushing both of them back. Nina stood frozen, watching months of planning, her entire bonus, her grand gesture of love and forgiveness, all of it turning to ash right before her eyes. Tears streamed down her face, but not because of the car. The car didn't matter. What mattered was what it represented. Proof that Daniel would never see her as anything more than an object he owned. Proof that her success, her transformation, her achievements meant nothing to him. Proof that he would rather destroy something beautiful than admit he was wrong. Neighbors began rushing out of their houses, shouting in alarm. Someone was already on the phone with 911. Marcus was crying inside the house, frightened by the commotion. Daniel stood there, chest heaving, watching the flames dance across what used to be a pristine vehicle. The firelight reflected in his eyes, making him look almost demonic. Then his phone rang. The ringtone cut through the crackling of the flames. He answered it absently, his eyes still fixed on the burning car. "Hello, Daniel, this is Martin Foster." His boss's voice was ice-cold. "Sir, this isn't a good time. Where were you today? You were supposed to present to the Springfield account. The presentation we've been preparing for 3 months. The account worth $2 million. Daniel's stomach dropped like a stone. In his obsession with following Nina, with proving she was cheating, he'd completely forgotten about the Springfield presentation. "Sir, I was dealing with a family emergency." "A family emergency." Martin's voice dripped with sarcasm. "Daniel, the client waited for an hour. 1 hour. Then they walked out and took their business to our competitor. Do you understand what you've cost this company?" "I can fix this. Let me call them, let me explain." "Don't bother. You're fired, Daniel. Effective immediately. Security will pack your desk on Monday. Your access is already revoked." The line went dead. Daniel stood there, phone in hand, watching the car burn, listening to his neighbors shout, smelling the acrid smoke that was beginning to block out the stars. Only then did Nina speak, her voice quiet but clear above the chaos. "Daniel, that car you just destroyed? I bought it. With my own money. It was your birthday present because despite everything you've done to me, I still cared about you." The fire department arrived within 10 minutes, their sirens wailing through the suburban Atlanta neighborhood. They extinguished the flames efficiently, their hoses turning the raging fire into smoking, hissing steam. What remained of the Toyota 4Runner was a blackened skeleton, twisted metal, shattered glass, and melted plastic. Neighbors stood in clusters on the sidewalk, watching, whispering. Some recorded the scene on their phones. Others just stared, their faces reflecting a mixture of horror and fascination. Daniel stood motionless, the phone still in his hand, his boss's words echoing in his mind. "Fired. Security will pack your desk. Access revoked." Nina stood several feet away, her arms wrapped around herself, tears still streaming down her face. She wasn't looking at the car anymore. She was looking at Daniel with an expression he'd never seen before. Not anger, not hatred, but something far worse. Pity. "Sir, can you tell me what happened here?" A firefighter approached Daniel, his tone professional but firm. Daniel opened his mouth, but no words came out. What could he possibly say? Nina stepped forward. "It was an accident," she said quietly. "A fuel leak. We didn't realize until it was too late." The firefighter looked between them, his experienced eyes clearly not believing the story but recognizing a domestic situation he didn't want to escalate. "Ma'am, if there was any kind of incident, we can get you help. There are resources." "It was an accident," Nina repeated, her voice firmer this time. The firefighter nodded slowly. "Okay. We'll need to file a report. The police will probably want to talk to you both as well." After the fire department left and the police took their brief statements, Nina stuck to her story about a fuel leak, and Daniel said nothing at all. The neighbors gradually dispersed. The excitement was over. The show had ended. Nina walked into the house without looking at Daniel. She went straight to Marcus's room, where their 3-year-old son was sitting with Mrs. Patterson, their elderly neighbor who had rushed over to comfort the frightened child when the fire started. "Is everything okay?" Mrs. Patterson whispered, her wrinkled face creased with concern. "It will be," Nina said, taking Marcus into her arms. "Thank you for watching him." After Mrs. Patterson left, Nina held Marcus close, breathing in his little boy smell, a mixture of baby shampoo and crackers and innocence. He was the only good thing to come from her marriage to Daniel. The only part she would never regret. "Mommy, why was there fire?" Marcus asked, his voice small. "Sometimes things break, sweetheart. But it's going to be okay." Downstairs, Daniel finally moved from where he'd been standing in the driveway. His legs felt numb as he walked to the front door, stepped inside, and sank onto the couch. The house was quiet except for the distant sound of Nina reading Marcus a bedtime story upstairs. The reality of what he'd done began to settle over him like a heavy blanket. He'd lost his job. He'd destroyed a car worth more money than he currently had in savings. He'd humiliated himself in front of the entire neighborhood. And worst of all, he'd been completely, devastatingly wrong. Nina had bought the car herself. With her own money. For him. The woman he'd mocked, the wife he'd called a stuffed sack, the person he'd systematically tried to break down. She'd earned a massive bonus through her own hard work, and she'd spent nearly all of it on him. On a gift he'd always wanted but could never afford. And he'd burned it to the ground because he was too insecure, too small, too consumed by his own inadequacy to believe she could be successful on her own. An hour later, Nina came downstairs. Marcus was asleep. She'd changed out of her nice dress into jeans and a t-shirt. She looked exhausted, drained of everything except a quiet, unshakable resolve. Daniel looked up at her from the couch. "Nina, His voice cracked. "I didn't know. I thought. I saw you with Richard at the dealership, and I thought. You thought I was having an affair," Nina finished for him, her voice flat. "You thought the only way I could possibly improve myself, succeed at work, or afford anything nice was if a man was giving it to me. Because you can't imagine that I could do it myself. I was wrong. I know I was wrong. Please. Nina. I'm so sorry." Nina looked at him for a long moment. "Do you know what hurts the most, Daniel? It's not the car. I don't care about the car. Then what? It's that you never saw me. Even when I was changing, growing, succeeding, you never once looked at me and felt proud. You never once thought, that's my wife. Look what she accomplished. Instead, you felt threatened. You felt small. And you made it your mission to make me feel even smaller." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "I can change. I can be better. Please don't leave me. I have nothing now. No job, no car, no." "That's not my problem anymore," Nina said quietly. She walked to the closet, pulled out 2 large suitcases, and began packing. Nina packed methodically, moving through the house she'd called home for 3 years with the calm efficiency of someone who had already made peace with her decision. She folded Marcus's clothes, his little t-shirts with dinosaurs, his tiny jeans, his favorite pajamas with rockets on them. She packed his toys, his books, his special blanket he couldn't sleep without. Daniel followed her from room to room like a ghost, his eyes red and swollen, his hands shaking. "Nina, please. Can we just talk about this? Can we go to counseling? I'll do anything. Anything." Nina didn't respond. She went into their bedroom, the room where they'd slept beside each other for 3 years, where they'd conceived Marcus, where she'd cried herself to sleep more times than she could count, and began packing her own things. "Where will you go?" Daniel asked, his voice barely a whisper. "I'll figure it out," Nina replied, carefully folding a blouse. "What about Marcus? You can't just take him." Nina stopped packing and turned to face Daniel fully for the first time since she'd started. Her eyes were dry now, clear and steady. Daniel, I can take him. I have a job. I have income. I have stability. You just got fired, you destroyed property, and you've been emotionally abusive for years. If you want to fight me on custody, we can go to court and let a judge hear everything. Every cruel word. Every insult. Every time you made me feel worthless. Is that what you want? Daniel's shoulders slumped. They both knew he had no ground to stand on. I never meant to hurt you, he whispered. Nina resumed packing. But you did. Over and over. And when I finally became strong enough to survive without you, you literally tried to burn down my success. It wasn't about. Yes, it was, Nina interrupted, her voice sharp for the first time. It was about control. It was about keeping me small enough that I'd never realize I could do better. Well, guess what, Daniel? I did realize it. And now I'm doing better. She zipped up the last suitcase. Everything she needed fit into 2 bags. It was remarkable, really, how little she was taking from this house, from this life. She wasn't taking furniture or dishes or any of the things they'd accumulated together. She was taking only what was hers, her clothes, Marcus's belongings, her laptop, her dignity. When you meet the next woman, Nina said, pulling both suitcases toward the bedroom door, try to be kind to her. Try to build her up instead of tearing her down. Try to understand that her success is not a threat to you, it's a gift. There won't be a next woman, Daniel said, tears streaming down his face. There's only you. Nina paused at the doorway, looking back at him one final time. The man sitting on their bed, broken and crying, barely resembled the confident salesman she'd married. But then again, the woman standing here with her suitcases barely resembled the timid, insecure girl who'd walked down the aisle 3 years ago. They'd both changed. The difference was, she'd changed for the better. Goodbye, Daniel. She went into Marcus's room, gently woke her son, and carried his sleepy form downstairs. He nestled against her shoulder, barely conscious. Mommy, where are we going? He mumbled. Somewhere safe, baby. Somewhere better. She loaded the suitcases into her regular car, the old Honda that still ran perfectly fine, and buckled Marcus into his car seat. As she backed out of the driveway, she glanced at the charred remains of the 4Runner still sitting there, a monument to Daniel's insecurity and rage. She didn't feel angry anymore. She felt free. Nina drove to a hotel that night, a clean, modest place near the highway. She booked a room with 2 beds, carried Marcus inside, and tucked him into the crisp white sheets. He was asleep before his head hit the pillow. Nina sat on the edge of the other bed, her phone in her hand, and opened her banking app. Even after buying the car, she still had $15,000 left from her bonus. It was enough for a security deposit on an apartment. Enough to start over. She opened her email and found a message from Patricia that had arrived just an hour earlier. Nina, I heard about the fire. I hope everyone is okay. If you need anything, time off, resources, anything at all, please let me know. You're valuable to this company and to me personally. Take care of yourself. Nina felt tears prick her eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude. She had people who valued her. She had skills that companies needed. She had a son who loved her unconditionally. She had everything that mattered. Nina replied to Patricia. Thank you so much for your concern. Everyone is safe. I'll be taking Monday off to handle some personal matters, but I'll be back Tuesday ready to work. I appreciate your support more than you know. She sent the email, plugged her phone into the charger, and lay back on the hotel bed. Through the thin curtains, she could see the glow of the city lights, and somewhere in that city was a future she was going to build with her own 2 hands. No one could burn that down. 3 weeks after leaving Daniel, Nina signed a lease on a 2-bedroom apartment in Midtown Atlanta. It was on the 3rd floor of a modern building with large windows that let in streams of golden sunlight. The rent was higher than she'd planned, but the location was perfect. Close to Marcus's new daycare, a 15-minute commute to Richardson Analytics, and far enough from her old neighborhood that she wouldn't accidentally run into Daniel. The apartment was unfurnished when she moved in, but Nina didn't mind. She bought a mattress for herself and a toddler bed for Marcus. She found a small dining table at a second-hand store. Everything else could wait. She'd learned that she didn't need much to be happy. She just needed peace. Marcus adjusted better than she'd expected. He was young enough that the change felt like an adventure rather than a trauma. Nina enrolled him in Little Explorers Daycare, a bright, cheerful place where the teachers wore smiles as genuine as their credentials. "Ms. Cole, Marcus is doing wonderfully," his teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, told Nina one afternoon during pickup. "He's social, curious, and very bright. You should be proud." Nina smiled, her heart swelling. "Thank you. I am." At work, Nina threw herself into her projects with renewed energy. Without the constant weight of Daniel's criticism dragging her down, she felt like she could fly. Her ideas became bolder, her presentations sharper, her confidence unshakable. Richard Chen noticed. During a quarterly review meeting, he pulled Nina aside. "Nina, I want to talk to you about something. The company is opening a new division focused on international consulting. We need someone to lead the analytics team. I'd like that person to be you." Nina's eyes widened. "Lead the team? Richard, I've only been here for 10 months. And in those 10 months, you've proven yourself more capable than analysts who've been here for 5 years. This is a leadership position. It comes with a significant raise and the opportunity to shape the direction of the entire division." "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Richard said with a rare smile. "You've earned this, Nina. Stop doubting yourself." Nina accepted the position. Her new salary was $170,000, more money than she'd ever dreamed of making. But more important than the money was what the promotion represented: validation. Proof that she was talented, capable, and worthy of success. That evening, after putting Marcus to bed in their cozy new apartment, Nina stood by the large window overlooking the city. The lights twinkled like earthbound stars. She thought about where she'd been a year ago, trapped in a marriage that was slowly killing her spirit, believing she was worthless because that's what Daniel had told her every single day. And now look at her. She was a team leader at a respected firm. She was raising her son in a home filled with love instead of criticism. She was free. Her phone buzzed. A text message from an unknown number. She hesitated before opening it, already knowing who it was. "Nina, it's Daniel. I got your number from your mom. Please don't block me. I just want to know how Marcus is doing. I miss him. I miss you. I'm getting help. I started seeing a therapist. I'm working on myself. Maybe in time, we could talk? Maybe we could try again?" Nina read the message twice, then set her phone down without responding. She didn't owe Daniel her time, her energy, or her forgiveness. Maybe he was genuinely getting help. Maybe he was changing. But that wasn't her problem to solve anymore. She'd spent 3 years trying to be enough for a man who would never be satisfied. She wasn't going to spend another minute wondering if he'd changed. Over the following months, Nina's life continued to blossom. She made friends at work, real friends who invited her to dinner parties and wine nights and who genuinely celebrated her successes instead of feeling threatened by them. She joined a book club. She took Marcus to the zoo on weekends. She went on a few dates, though nothing serious. She was in no rush. One Saturday afternoon, 6 months after leaving Daniel, Nina took Marcus to the park. They were on the swings when a woman approached, someone Nina vaguely recognized from the old neighborhood. "Nina, is that you? Oh my goodness, you look amazing." Nina smiled. "Thank you. How are you?" "I'm good. I heard about what happened with Daniel. I just want to say, you're so brave for leaving. So many women stay." "I'm not brave," Nina said, watching Marcus giggle as she pushed his swing. "I just finally realized I deserved better." The woman nodded, her eyes misty. My sister is going through something similar. Do you mind if I give her your number? Maybe you could talk to her. Nina thought about it. About how isolated she'd felt during the worst of her marriage. About how desperately she'd needed someone to tell her it wasn't her fault, that she wasn't crazy, that she could survive on her own. Yes, Nina said. Please do. I'd be happy to talk to her. As the woman walked away, Marcus called out from the swing. Mommy, higher. Push me higher. Nina laughed and pushed him higher, watching him soar through the air, fearless and free, just like she'd learned to be. Daniel Cole sat in the small studio apartment he'd moved into after Nina left, staring at his phone. The text he'd sent her 2 weeks ago remained unanswered. No reply. Not even the courtesy of a leave me alone. Just silence. The apartment was in a rough part of town, the only place he could afford on unemployment benefits while he searched for a new job. The search wasn't going well. Word had spread in Atlanta's tight-knit business community about his firing from the tech company. His former boss, Martin, hadn't exactly been discreet about why Daniel was let go. Unreliable. Missed a major client presentation. Personal issues affecting performance. Those words followed Daniel to every interview. Potential employers would seem interested until they called his references. Then the offers would evaporate like morning mist. Daniel had started therapy, just like he'd told Nina in his text. Dr. Williams was a patient man in his 60s who specialized in anger management and relationship issues. Tell me about your marriage, Dr. Williams had asked during their first session. Daniel had spent an hour trying to explain, trying to make himself sound like the victim. She changed. She became someone different. She stopped caring about me. Dr. Williams had listened quietly, taking notes, and then asked a simple question. Did she change, or did you finally see who she really was when she stopped accepting your treatment of her? The question had hit Daniel like a punch to the stomach. He'd sat there, speechless, as the truth began to unravel before him. Over the following weeks, Dr. Williams helped Daniel see what he'd refused to acknowledge. That his insecurity had poisoned his marriage, that his need to control Nina had driven her away, that his cruelty had been a defense mechanism against his own feelings of inadequacy. When Nina started succeeding, Dr. Williams explained, it held up a mirror to you. And you didn't like what you saw. Instead of working on yourself, you tried to break the mirror. Daniel was beginning to understand. But understanding didn't erase what he'd done. It didn't bring Nina back. It didn't rebuild the car he'd burned or restore the job he'd lost or repair the man he'd become. One evening, 3 months after Nina left, Daniel's mother called. Danny, I ran into Nina at the grocery store today, she said, her voice careful. Daniel's heart leaped. How is she? How's Marcus? They're both wonderful. Marcus has gotten so big. And Nina. Danny, she's glowing. She looks so happy. She told me about her promotion at work. She's leading an entire team now. Daniel felt his chest tighten. That's good. I'm glad she's doing well. Are you? His mother asked pointedly. Because you don't sound glad. You sound bitter. I'm not bitter, Mom. I miss her. I miss my son. Then you should have treated her better when you had the chance, his mother said, her voice sharper than he'd ever heard it. I raised you better than that, Daniel. The way you talked to her, the things you said about her body after she gave birth to your child, that was disgraceful. I know, Mom. I know that now. Knowing it now doesn't help Nina. It doesn't undo the damage. You need to focus on becoming a better man, not for her, but for yourself. And maybe, if you're lucky, the next woman you meet won't have to suffer like Nina did. After his mother hung up, Daniel sat in his dark apartment, thinking about the Bible verse his grandmother used to quote, "Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall." He'd been proud once. Proud of his job, his income, his attractive wife. But that pride had curdled into arrogance, into cruelty, into a need to keep Nina beneath him so he'd never have to confront his own inadequacy. And now here he was. No wife. No son. No job. No future that looked anything like the one he'd imagined. He opened his phone and looked at the last photo he had of his family together. Him, Nina, and baby Marcus at the beach 2 years ago. Nina was smiling in the photo, but Daniel could see it now, the way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. The way she held herself slightly away from him. The signs had been there all along that she was unhappy, that she was enduring rather than thriving. He'd just been too blind to see it. Daniel deleted the unanswered text he'd sent Nina. She didn't owe him anything. Not forgiveness, not a second chance, not even a reply. She'd moved on. She'd built a life without him. And according to everyone who'd seen her, she was happier than she'd ever been with him. That truth hurt more than anything else. Not that he'd lost her, but that she was better off without him. That his presence in her life had been a weight, not a gift. That she'd had to leave him to finally become who she was always meant to be. The next morning, Daniel woke up early. He went for a run, something he hadn't done in years. It was hard. His lungs burned, his legs ached, but he kept going. He had a long way to go. Maybe he'd never get Nina back. Maybe he didn't deserve to. But he could become the kind of man who wouldn't make the same mistakes again. He could become the kind of man his son could be proud of, even if that son was being raised by someone else. It was the least he could do. As for Nina, she was sitting in her office at Richardson Analytics, reviewing proposals for the International Division's first major project. Through her window, she could see the Atlanta skyline stretching toward the horizon, full of possibility. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus's daycare. Marcus drew a picture of you today. He says you're a superhero. Photo attached. Nina opened the attachment. It was a crayon drawing of a stick figure woman with a cape and a big smile. Above it, in Marcus's wobbly handwriting assisted by his teacher, were the words, "My mommy is strong." Nina smiled, her eyes misting. She saved the picture as her phone wallpaper. She'd survived. She'd rebuilt. She'd become the woman she was always meant to be, not despite Daniel's cruelty, but because she'd finally stopped believing his lies about who she was. The Bible says in Proverbs 14 verse 1, "The wise woman builds her house, but with her own hands the foolish one tears hers down." Daniel had torn down his house. But Nina had built a palace. If this story moved you, please hit that like button right now. Subscribe to Real Incredible Stories and turn on all notifications. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Comment below. What's the biggest lesson you learned from Nina's story? Thank you so much for watching. Remember, never let anyone make you feel small. And when you rise, don't look back at the people who tried to keep you down. You are worthy. You are capable. You are enough. See you in the next story.